When it comes to corrupt cops, some people decide to go for quick justice by taking matters into their own hands. These 7 police officers presumed to be protectors of lives and properties chose to be on history's bad side. We have 3 witnesses who have just given sworn affidavits that says that he did have a relationship with my wife. Before I was convicted, their end was swift and violent. They were instantly murdered, facing the harsh reality of criminality. How did these decorated law enforcement veterans fall so far from grace? What drives someone to seek bloody retribution rather than letting the justice system run its course? The answers may lie buried in the past, waiting to be uncovered amid the ruins of shattered careers and broken lives. Theodore Dyer. In the quiet town of Grand Haven, the O.R. Dyer had seamlessly blended into the community, presenting himself as a well-adjusted and trustworthy neighbour. Little did those around him suspect the heinous actions lying beneath the surface. One of Dyer's victims, a woman named Mary, later expressed her astonishment, saying that she never had any reason to worry about him in April 2012. Mary and her 9-year-old daughter moved into an apartment next door to Dyer's unit. At first they simply thought they had a normal, friendly neighbour. Dyer and his girlfriend had no children of their own, and he seemed to develop a fondness for Mary's young daughter. However, Mary's perception of Dyer would soon shatter in June 2013. Mary's daughter was at Dyer's apartment late in the evening as Mary felt it was time for her daughter to come home. She had an uneasy feeling and decided not to knock before entering. Peering into Dyer's bedroom, Mary witnessed the unthinkable. Dyer was taking advantage of her young child immediately. She rushed in, grabbed her daughter, and fled back to their own apartment. Distraught Mary confronted her daughter, who confirmed the horrific truth. Mary promptly reported the incident to the authorities. Dyer was eventually convicted of first-degree criminal illicit harassment, and the investigation revealed he had assaulted Mary's daughter on at least 3 occasions without her mother's knowledge. Dyer's crimes would ultimately lead to his demise. While serving his prison sentence, he was placed in a cell with another inmate. Stephen Sanderson. Sanderson, who was also serving a life sentence, learned of Dyer's heinous acts against children in a fit of vigilante justice. Sanderson confronted Dyer and ultimately strangled him to death. For Mary, the news of Dyer's death evoked a mix of emotions. She expressed relief that her daughter would not have to fear further attacks. Yet she also acknowledged that she never wished for Dyer's death. As she poignantly stated, "I think it was a relief for her knowing that this wasn't going to happen again." While some may view Sanderson as a hero, he was clear that he did not see himself as such. He emphasized that he was not the one to judge Dyer, but rather believed that God was the true judge. Sanderson was subsequently sentenced to life in prison, though his attorney argued that the additional sentence held little practical significance given his existing life sentence. Paul Razo. Razo tragedy struck the Los Angeles Police Department as a former officer once celebrated for his bravery met a grim fate while in custody. Paul Razo, a 46-year-old EXL Angeles Police Department cop, had been charged with the horrific illicit assault and harassment of 4 young boys, including his own relatives. But before he could face just JCE, Razo died under mysterious circumstances while receiving medical treatment. The story began to unfold on May 10, 2023, when Razo was arrested by detectives from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He had been accused of committing lewd acts upon children between the ages of 9 and 13 over the span of over a decade. From 2006 to 2017, prosecutors alleged that 2 of the victims were Razo's own family members, while the other 2 were the sons of a woman he had dated. Razo had been working as a training coordinator at the Hollywood division before his sudden departure from the force. In March 2023, just 7 years earlier, he had been hailed as a hero, awarded the department's prestigious Medal of Valor for saving a man from a burning car while off duty, but the former officer's fall from grace was swift and shocking. He was swiftly charged with 8 counts of lewd acts upon a child and held on a staggering $2 million bail following his arrest. Razo was set to appear in court multiple times for his arraignment, but the hearings were repeatedly delayed for undisclosed reasons. Tragically, Razo never made it to that courtroom on the evening of May 20th, 2023. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department reported that the former officer had died while in custody, undergoing treatment for a pre-existing medical condition. A department spokesperson stated that Razo passed while receiving medical care and that an autopsy would be conducted to determine the cause of death. The Los Angeles Police Department, deeply disturbed by the allegations, had already launched an internal investigation into Razo's past behavior, vowing to review his work history for any similar misconduct. Gerard John Schaefer. The name Gerard John Schaefer strikes fear into the hearts of those familiar with the dark underbelly of true crime. Known by a chilling array of aliases, the Butcher of Blind Creek, the Hangman, and most fittingly, the Killer Cop, Schaefer was a monster who masqueraded as a protector of the law. Born in 1946, Schaefer's formative years were marked by dysfunction and turmoil. The constant moving, his father's alcoholism, and the harsh treatment of his family all contributed to a deeply troubled upbringing. Even as a teenager, Schaefer harbored disturbing fantasies of harming women he deemed contemptible, a monstrous mindset that would only grow more twisted with time. In 1971, just 7 months before donning the uniform of a police officer, Schaefer had a brief stint with the Wilton Manors Police Department. This would prove to be a mere warm-up for the horrors to come. On June 23, 1972, he secured a deputy role with the Martin County Sheriff's Department, a position that would grant him unfettered access to prey on vulnerable women. Schaefer's modus operandi was chillingly calculated. On July 21, 1972, he met two teenage hitchhikers, Pamela Narleski and Barbara Bramucci, and offered to drive them to their destination. Once in his vehicle, he deviated from the planned route, lecturing the girls about the dangers of hitchhiking before binding them with handcuffs and gagging them. Schaefer then took the girls to a remote forest, where he secured one victim to a cypress tree, fastening a noose around her neck in a way that forced her to stand on exposed roots to relieve the pressure. He repeated this gruesome ritual with the other girl. Before he could return to his victims, he received an urgent radio message that forced him to leave. When he came back, the girls had managed to break free. He hastily reported the incident, claiming he had merely intended to teach them a lesson. However, the authorities soon discovered a darker truth. Schaefer was responsible for the murders of up to 26 women, his victims bound and strangled in a signature style. Schaefer's reign of terror was finally brought to an end, but even behind bars, his story continued to unfold. He offered to be sent to a psychiatric hospital and even helped solve other crimes, including the conviction of an international child exploitation ring. In a tragic twist, his own life ended in a dispute over hot water, his body stabbed over 40 times by a fellow inmate. The killer cop's story had reached its grim conclusion, but his legacy of terror would linger on. Cabo Bruno. In the annals of Brazil's troubled history, the case of Flávio Valdo de Oliveira, known infamously as Cabo Bruno, stands as a stark reminder of the fine line between justice and vengeance. Born in the humble town of Uchoa, São Paulo, Flávio Valdo de Oliveira's childhood was marked by a playful nickname that would eventually come to define his tragic legacy. As a young man, Oliveira joined the ranks of the military police in São Paulo, a career that would soon take a dark turn. Driven by a misguided sense of justice, he donned the mantle of a vigilante, prowling the outskirts of the city and exacting his own brand of retribution upon those he perceived as criminals. The moniker Cabo Bruno, a nod to a local alcoholic, became a twisted badge of honor, a testament to his ruthless actions. The bodies began to pile up, victims of Cabo Bruno's merciless rampage, rumored to target local traitors and those he deemed undesirable. His killing spree spread panic throughout the region, leaving a trail of grief and unanswered questions in its wake. Yet in a twist of fate, one man, José Aparo Benedito, managed to survive Cabo Bruno's onslaught, feigning death and escaping the scene. As the case gained national attention, the media played a pivotal role in bringing Cabo Bruno's crimes to light. Journalist Kako Barcelos, through his coverage in the journal National, helped expose the extent of the vigilante actions, shedding light on a disturbing pattern of violence that had gripped the city in 1983. Aftermath. Cabo Bruno's reign of terror finally came to an end when he was arrested under a court order, facing accusations of involvement in over 20 murders. Initially, he confessed to only one of these killings, but years later, he acknowledged his involvement in approximately 20 more. However, the true extent of his crimes remained shrouded in mystery, as some believed that others had falsely attributed additional killings to him. The investigation uncovered a chilling reality. Cabo Bruno was not acting alone. A network of at least 12 police officers, including 2 high-ranking officials, was found to be complicit in these executions, often targeting victims based solely on their appearance. The evidence was damning, and Cabo Bruno was eventually sentenced to 1,133 years in prison. Despite his attempts to flee on 3 separate occasions while incarcerated, Cabo Bruno underwent a remarkable transformation. He claimed to have converted to evangelical Christianity and expressed a desire to be addressed as something other than Bruno. In 2008, he married a housewife who volunteered in the prison's ecumenical chapel, where he served as a pastor, gaining a following that included the infamous murderer Lindenberg Alves. After serving a portion of his sentence, Cabo Bruno petitioned for a conversion to a semi-open regime, which was ultimately granted in 2012. Despite his exemplary behavior and commendations from prison officials, the decision to release him remained controversial, as his history of escape attempts had denied him the benefit of temporary leave. Tragically, Cabo Bruno's newfound freedom was short-lived. Just over a month after his release, he was fatally shot with 18 to 20 bullets in the Quadra Coberta neighborhood of Pindamonhangaba, the apparent victim of an execution-style attack. The chilling end to his story serves as a haunting reminder of the consequences of unchecked violence and the fragility of redemption in the face of a life consumed by darkness. How do we explain this scenario? The first image shows a disgraced police officer sitting in the defendant's box of the courtroom, his wrists shackled in chains. Despite the severity of the charges he faces, the corrupt cop wears a smug, almost mocking grin, seemingly unconcerned as the trial proceeds around him. However, the next frame captures a radically different and shocking scene. The cop is now slumped over, blood spattering the pristine walls of the courtroom. His head is bent at an unnatural angle, teeth and shards of bone scattered across the floor in a macabre display. The self-assured smirk has been replaced by a look of pure agony, the light in his eyes extinguished. This stark juxtaposition lays bare the consequences of the officer's heinous crimes, the swift and brutal retribution that his victims, or someone acting on their behalf, has exacted. What transgression could have driven someone to such an extreme act of violence right under the nose of the justice system? The haunting images raise more questions than answers, leaving us to ponder the fine line between the rule of law and the desperate pursuit of personal vengeance. Let's find out more in the next case. Gennady Movich. In the quiet village of IST, nestled in the rolling hills of the VBK Oblast, a young man named Gennady Movich was born in 1947. Little did the villagers know that this unassuming son of the Soviet countryside would one day become one of the most notorious serial killers in the history of the USSR. Gennady's early life seemed unremarkable. He served in the army like so many young men of his generation before returning home in 1971. But it was then that the darkness within him began to emerge. Embittered by the discovery that his girlfriend had left him and married another, Gennady's mind twisted with rage and despair. On a lonely road between VBK and Patk one night, that darkness found its first outlet. Gennady encountered a young woman walking alone, and in that moment, he succumbed to his darkest impulses, strangling her to death. This was only the beginning. Over the next decade, Gennady's killing spree would claim the lives of over 30 innocent women across the VBK region. Many of his victims were lured to their deaths through calculated acts of deception. Gennady would use his unassuming charm to gain a woman's trust, often inviting them into his distinctive red Zaporozhets car. Once isolated, he would brutally strangle or smother them, robbing their lifeless bodies of money and valuables. In some cases, he even presented these stolen goods to his unsuspecting wife as gifts. Yet, to the outside world, Gennady maintained the facade of a respectable family man. He was a non-alcoholic, a conscientious worker, and even a member of the Communist Party. His neighbors and co-workers were completely unaware of the monster that lurked beneath the surface. As the bodies continued to mount, local investigators struggled to make sense of the seemingly random killings. It was not until the 1980s that a young, determined detective named Nikolai Ignatovich began to piece together the truth. Ignatovich theorized that these were not isolated incidents, but the work of a single serial killer. His crucial breakthrough came when he realized the killer was likely using a distinctive red Zaporozhets car. Unbeknownst to the investigators, Gennady was actually participating in the search for himself as a member of the Voluntary People's Drina, a community policing organization. Gennady had insider knowledge of the investigation, which allowed him to evade capture for years, even as the body count continued to rise. 1984 was his most prolific year, with 12 women falling victim to his murderous rampage. Gennady's fatal mistake came when he attempted to derail the investigation by sending an anonymous letter to a local newspaper, falsely claiming responsibility on behalf of an imaginary militant group. This clumsy ploy allowed forensic experts to eventually match the handwriting to Gennady himself. In December 1985, Gennady Movich was finally arrested. Psychiatrists deemed him sane but diagnosed him with psychopathy. After initially denying his crimes, he eventually confessed, revealing the full horrific extent of his killing spree. Gennady was sentenced to death and executed by firing squad in 1987. The VBK case, as it became known, shook the Soviet Union to its core. It exposed the failures of a corrupt investigative system that had wrongfully convicted and even executed innocent people in its haste to close the case. Christopher Jordan Dorner. Christopher Jordan Dorner was born on June 4, 1979, in Southern California, where he grew up and attended Cypress High School, graduating in 1997. After high school, Dorner graduated from Southern Utah University in 2001 with a degree in political science and a minor in psychology. While in college, he was even a running back on the university's football team from 1999 to 2000. Dorner later reflected that he was the only African-American student in his school from first grade through seventh grade, which led to some altercations due to the racism he experienced growing up. Despite these challenges, Dorner had decided from a young age that he wanted to become a police officer. He joined a youth program offered by the police department in La Palma, where he was living at the time of the later shootings. By most accounts, Dorner came from an admired and well-liked family. Neighbors described him as a man who usually kept to himself. He had been previously married but had no children. Court records show that his wife filed for divorce in 2007. Dorner's deadly killing spree began in February 2013 with a package he sent to CNN's Anderson Cooper. This package contained Dorner's written complaints and manifesto. After the first killings in 2013, the threats in this manifesto led law enforcement to launch a major manhunt that spread across California, Nevada, and even into Mexico. Protective details were set up for over 40 potential targets named in Dorner's manifesto, with thousands of police assigned to patrol highways across Southern California. The Los Angeles Police Department even took patrol officers off motorcycles for their own protection. In the early morning hours of February 7, 2013, two LAPD officers were driving to one of these protection details when they were flagged down by a man who reported seeing someone matching Dorner's description at a nearby gas station. The officers investigated the report and ended up following a pickup truck. When the driver stopped and got out, he opened fire on the officers with a rifle, grazing one officer's head. About an hour and a half later, A man believed to be Dorner was spotted trying to steal a boat in San Diego, saying he planned to take it to Mexico. A federal criminal complaint was filed against Dorner that same day for allegedly fleeing California to avoid prosecution. Hours later, the burned-out remains of Dorner's vehicle were found near Big Bear Lake, about 80 miles from Los Angeles. A large-scale search of the surrounding area ensued, with over 125 officers going door to door, and all schools in the area were placed on lockdown. On February 13th, human remains were found in the ruins of a cabin that had been the focus of the search, along with a wallet containing Dorner's driver's license. The constant psychological torment took a heavy toll on him. In a tragic turn of events, the manhunt for Dorner had been intense, with law enforcement going to great lengths to try to stop him. Tragically, in the process, two innocent bystanders, Emma Hernandez and her daughter, Margie Carranza, were shot by LAPD officers who mistook their vehicle for Dorner's. The city of Los Angeles later paid multi-million-dollar settlements to the two women. Ultimately, the Dorner case stands as a tragic example of how a quest for justice can spiral out of control with devastating consequences. It serves as a sobering reminder of the importance of restraint, due process, and respect for human life, even in the face of a determined and dangerous adversary. Carol Edward Cole. The story of Carol Edward Cole is a tragic one, a tale of a troubled childhood, mental anguish, and the unthinkable acts of violence that ultimately led to his downfall. Carol was born in 1938 in Sioux City, Iowa, the second son of Leva and Vesta Cole. From an early age, Carol faced great adversity in his home life. His father, Leva, worked long hours in a shipyard, often leaving young Carol under the care of his emotionally abusive mother, Vesta. Vesta was a troubled woman, prone to affairs and lashing out at her son. She would dress him as a girl, humiliating him, and threatened to beat him if he ever told his father about her infidelities. Upon his release, the killings began. Carol's first known adult victim was Essie Louise Buck, whom he strangled in his car in 1971. Over the next several years, he claimed the lives of numerous other women, often dumping their bodies in remote locations. His wives and girlfriends were not spared either. He strangled his second wife, Diana Faye Young, in 1979. By the time authorities finally caught up with Carol in 1980, he had confessed to murdering at least 14 women, though he suspected the true number was even higher. He was convicted of 3 killings in Texas and sentenced to life in prison. After being extradited to Nevada, he was tried and convicted of 2 more murders and ultimately sentenced to death. In the end, Carol's disturbing crimes caught up with him. On the eve of his execution in 1985, anti-death penalty advocates pleaded for clemency, but Carol himself refused, even requesting a final meal of jumbo fried shrimp, fries, and clam chowder. As the clock struck 2:30 a.m. on December 6, 1985, Carol Edward Cole, the troubled son of Vesta and Leva, was put to death by lethal injection. His brain was removed and studied in a final grim attempt to understand the depths of his depravity. The life of this serial killer, shaped by a traumatic childhood and unchecked mental illness, had come to a tragic end. As we draw the curtains on this shocking journey through the dark underbelly of justice, one question looms large. What happens when those sworn to uphold the law become the very embodiment of its corruption? The stories you've witnessed today serve as a chilling reminder that the scales of justice can tip in the most unexpected ways. From courtroom confrontations that turned deadly to the haunting echoes of betrayal, these cases reveal the extreme lengths to which both sides will go when the line between right and wrong blurs. But don't let the dust settle just yet. There's more lurking beneath the surface. If you found these tales gripping, wait until you see what we have in store next. Subscribe and hit that notification bell to dive deeper into the world where law meets chaos and justice takes a chilling turn. Your curiosity deserves to be fed. Stay with us as we unravel more spine-tingling tales that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about crime and punishment. These shocking stories remind us that justice can be a double-edged sword, and sometimes the very system meant to uphold the law can turn deadly. But what does this mean for the future of law enforcement? As we close, I want you to think about the implications of these events. Are the scales of justice truly balanced? If you found these stories gripping, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more jaw-dropping revelations. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you think should happen to corrupt officers? Stay tuned, because our next video will take you even deeper into the dark side of justice.